guys, welcome to the BFF Report. I'm your host, Mike aka Fony. Today we're gonna be taking a look at the reboot of Tomb Raider. Let's check it out. Tomb Raider 2013, as this is gonna be, I guess, commonly referred to as, since there's so many Tomb Raider games out there, is a modernization of the franchise, or a reboot, that focuses on the origins of Lara Croft. Now, throughout your gameplay experience, you're gonna witness Lara go from this innocent, brilliant archaeologist to goddamn superhero She-Rambo. And with a rating of mature, PEGI 18, and of course the controversial rapey scene shown at E3, I was kind of worried that this game would focus a little too much on the sexualization of Lara Croft. But outside of your initial encounter with the gentleman who gropes you and then you consequently you end up shooting him in the face, there is practically no mention whatsoever of Lara Croft's looks. So what's with the mature and PEGI 18 ratings? Well, you're gonna hear the word fuck like 3 times, shit like 60, and you're probably gonna run across about 600 to 800 different rotting corpses. Some of them you're actually gonna go swimming with, which has to work wonders with all of these scrapes, cuts, bruises, gaping wounds, and all of that she sustained up to this point. But if you're truly bothered by inconsistencies like this, you might not want to pick up this game, or any game for that matter. Now, speaking of story, the entire game revolves around Lara Croft trying to find and save her friends after becoming shipwrecked on this island full of crazy-ass cultists. Now, I mentioned the character transition in terms of violence for Lara Croft, and I want to go ahead and point this out. So, initially, you kill a deer, and she feels remorse for doing so, but she has to do it in order to survive. And then, not long after that, you get captured, and your captor, this is the rapey scene that I mentioned earlier, will actually kill you, so you end up killing him first, naturally. But even then, the game puts emphasis on the fact that this is her first kill. She is shocked by it, and she has to kind of learn to deal with it in order to survive. So this is great. We have a good, solid foundation for the character development for Lara Croft. Unfortunately, though, we didn't get a lot of character development for everybody surrounding her. There are other characters that you can build up sort of a background based off of. You find, for example, a video camera, and you can watch these videos showing a little bit of backstory to all these other characters that you're supposed to be out here caring about and saving. But you only get like 2 or 3 pieces like this. Everything else is helped fleshed out by your interactions with the characters, which in some cases they're very, very short, and finding these diary pieces all over the place. Everybody's played an RPG where you're running around, you find a data pad, or you find a leftover recording or something to give you a little bit of backstory, not only on the previous inhabitants of this island, but also your own shipwrecked survivors. Your friends are, for some reason, writing these notes and leaving them all over the island in case somebody wants to read what their thoughts are. So while they do a great job of emphasizing the characters of Lara Croft and 2 other key individuals in the story, if you want to learn about anybody else on the ship, because you're going to be saving them, so if you want to give a shit about them, you need to go find these pages laying around. Otherwise, in the off chance that one of them dies, you might be like, oops, oh well. Now, up until this point, you guys probably noticed that my hair looks fantastic. Unfortunately, there is a trade-off here. I actually opted to go ahead and reduce my resolution in order to accommodate the truss effects throughout almost the entire game. At the very end, it started getting so crazy with the weather effects and all that other stuff going on that I was actually starting to suffer a bit on my frame rates, so I had to turn it off. But for a majority of your gameplay, if you could have truss effects on, it looks really, really good, and it feels very almost natural. It's a little low grav, and the luminosity might be a little off, but if you don't mind taking the performance hit, I highly recommend turning it on. It looks good. So let's talk a little bit about the island and the environments that you're going to be experiencing while you're playing the game. Obviously, you have tombs. You also have these shanty towns. You have these crazy temples. You have so many different environments. This island is completely out of control. And each one of these areas is actually sectioned off by a transition, you could say a corridor or a room or something. There's always something that happens, or there's some kind of element that's in place to prevent you from immediately going from one gigantic area to the next. But it's done so well that the only way you typically notice it is if it tells you in the lower left corner that you've arrived to a new zone. There have, however, been a few situations where I've experienced a little bit of latency, where the game will kind of lock up for just a brief moment. Sounds, everything's still going, but it'll lock up for about 3 to 4 seconds while it's trying to transition to the next area. Maybe I'm moving too quickly throughout their transition corridor through these caves or through this underwater approach or whatever it is. And while it was annoying, it didn't kill me. I was always worried that the load screen would end and I'm midair and I would die. The game does a good job of preventing you from being killed by, it loading the next section. Now, about a third of the way through the game, you guys are going to notice that you're going to be doubling back on some of the same environments that you previously were at. And actually, what's funny is this kind of threw me off guard. As some of you guys know, I have a history of Square Enix, and the first thing I thought was, oh my god, copy pasta. But it turns out it is the same area, but previously it was raining, and the weather was really just shitty in general. And of course, you know, it was night, and then here it's daytime, and everything's sunny and happy. Which wasn't quite enough for me initially until I realized that, well, hey, here I am. My character has progressed to the point where I have new tools, new abilities, new ways of maneuvering my character. I can now complete some of these, I guess you would call them completionist events, that are in each one of these areas, because now I have the ability to get to those points I couldn't get to before. And not only are there those events, but you also have access now to salvage and material that you could use to further upgrade yourself that, again, are just scattered all over the place. So if you're like 2/3 of the way through the game, feel free to go and take all of your new awesome stuff that you've accumulated and just take one of these, go to one of these campsites, click on it, and then you're gonna be able to fast travel between the major camp locations that are scattered throughout the island. So what exactly is this progression system? Well, it's basically you run around, you find salvage, because you start off with like garbage, right? You have a bow that's basically like a stick and a string and a couple of arrows, and that's it. And then you could take all this salvage laying around and somehow MacGyver it together to create a better bow. And you can find pieces laying around for like your shotgun or your pistol or whatever. And you eventually end up upgrading your weapons to the point to where they're nowhere near what they were when you first started, with the exception of course, the bow. They still shoot arrows, but in the end, they can explode, which is kind of nice. But on top of that, you could also upgrade Lara herself. And this could be anything from the way that she scans an area using her instincts ability, right? You could extend that out so that it will see further, see things through walls, and it'll mark them on your map for you. You can even unlock the ability to actually check the pockets of the dead bodies that you're looting in order to get more stuff back. Hell, even animals. You could actually spec into getting more back from looting animals, which, by the way, seems almost completely useless. There's no hunger system in this game. When I first killed an animal, and the deer, right? The deer I showed you, when I first killed that, I was like, oh sweet, there's a hunger system. I might starve. That's awesome. No, it doesn't exist. The only reason why you kill things is purely for XP. There are also combat elements that can be upgraded using this system, and as well as maneuverability, the way that you kind of traverse certain terrain and all that can be upgraded as well. I mean, outside of the UI completely sucking for this thing, it's a fairly decent and simple to use progression system. Now let's talk about movement and environment and how your character kind of interacts with the environment around her. The way the character moves and jumps, the game plays a lot like a platformer. The way it should, because there's a lot of platforming elements. A lot of times you're gonna find yourself kind of shortchanging yourself on a jump, and she's gonna reach out, she's gonna grab onto something, you push up or you push spacebar, and you're able to climb back up. Or if you jump onto kind of a craggy side of a cliff here, you're able to throw your pick into it and prevent yourself from falling to your death. And all of this is done with such impressive fluidity. It could not have been done any better. It feels so good running and jumping between things. I would just go and try to find random things to jump onto, and as long as my character can reach it, I can climb it. It's funny, in a lot of games where there's a lot of parkour style elements, you feel like there are only certain areas that you could go and you could climb. And while area design does have some limiting factors in terms of where you can explore, there's so much that you can do, so much freedom they give you, that you almost have to look for areas where there are restrictions in place. Now, in terms of QuickTime events, because this has come up a lot, if you've only played the first hour and a half of this game, a majority of it, yes, indeed, especially the first 30 to 45 minutes, is just chock full of QuickTime events. It is loaded. And it really kind of gives the game, in my opinion, kind of a bad first impression. It really is. Because there is massive amounts of content that has nothing to do with QTE at all. Occasionally you're gonna come across something that requires that you crank something, right? Okay, so mash E a couple times, no problem. But my only complaint is that they didn't really explain this very well early on in the game. They showed a symbol right in the center on the action. There's a symbol, it has a hand. What the hell does that mean? If you have a controller, it's probably gonna show the button itself. At the bottom it says press E, but you're so focused on the center, a lot of people end up missing this. But there's virtually no need for QuickTime events in majority of the combat that you do. You can, however, stun somebody, run up to them, and then hit a key to go into kind of a finishing move animation. But it's extremely fluid and quick. It doesn't really take you out of the action at all. Hell, even their cover system is extremely quick. You don't even notice it a lot of times. You're probably sitting there hitting shift thinking, oh, I need to get in cover, I'm holding shift. No, you don't. The character will automatically duck down behind something if it's high enough for her to use as cover. It's funny because in an industry where third-person shooters are so reliant on cover-based mechanics, Gears of War, Mass Effect, right? Without those, some players feel almost lost. This game nails it so perfectly, and it's so transparent that a lot of gamers might say there's no cover system in this game, when in fact, the character herself almost seems just simply smart enough to just duck behind things by herself. I mean, who'd have thought Lara Croft, Tomb Raider, leading the way in cover-based mechanics in today's gaming industry? And the rest of combat in this game is also very quick, very visceral. It's funny. Have you ever played a game where you go to switch weapons and you end up dying or taking a shot to the face or whatever because you didn't swap weapons fast enough, right? You ran out of ammo on your assault rifle, so you switch the pistol really quick to get off a few shots, and then you die. It sucks, right? Not a problem here. I've never ever seen someone swap weapons so incredibly fast. Look at this. It's obviously extremely unrealistic. The rest of her body just doesn't even know what's happening. But as goofy as it looks, it actually adds to the speed of combat itself. My only remaining complaints is really that she doesn't run very fast, which is, I mean, it's kind of a minor thing. You end up kind of getting used to it. But if you play multiplayer first, you have a sprint function that does not translate or work at all in single player, which kind of sucks. And the other big thing is I do all this stealth work, stealthily killing people and all that stuff, but you can't hide bodies. Like, I can't even, like, you know, click on them or push some key or whatever to, like, you know, cover them with dirt or something. I just can't. I can't drag them out of the way. I understand, I'm not playing Thief, but in the harder difficulties, you're gonna find that you're gonna be using cover a lot. You're gonna be using a lot of stealth kills because if the second you're seen, you're gonna die in most cases. So not being able to hide bodies is a bit of a downside. And also, for whatever reason, there's an effect that's on almost every shot in the entire game. And so check this out. Back when I used to work on reality TV, I was a gaffer and a grip for a while there. And it was a lot of fun. We were basically the MacGyvers of behind the scenes reality TV. We would take a drill and a piece of plywood, cut out a 5-inch diameter circle from the plywood, mount it to the tip of the drill, but off center, and then take that little contraption there. Imagine this, it's a drill with a disc on the end of it. We would mount it to the camera tripod or the steady camera, whatever it is the person was using to hold the camera. And then we'd use zip ties to keep the drill on while the person was filming. The result was, of course, a shaky cam effect because the cameraman would naturally try to keep this thing in balance while it's moving around, and it would create this really nice natural type effect. That is every shot in this game. The entire game was filmed with a camera, monopod, a drill, and a 5-inch diameter disc on the end. Because I don't know why everything's shaky. You do eventually get used to it. By the end of the game, I didn't even notice it, and it was actually kind of adding to the elements. If it was still, I would notice. It was like, whoa, everything's really still. What's going on? But unfortunately, there's no way to turn this off, so you just have to get used to it. Again, like I said, I got used to it, and everything was fine. But I definitely would have liked to see a little toggle for camera shake. Seriously. But what I found the most rewarding about gameplay was actually exploring the bonus tombs, even though I would go explore some ancient tomb that nobody has ever found, right, in some cases, and I'd find a chest at the end, and it's like, oh, look, a handgun piece, okay. But these bonus tombs are essentially just giant puzzles, and while you do have plenty of puzzles that are kind of intertwined into your typical gameplay, these are usually much more technical, and thus are much more rewarding when you complete them. So let's go and talk about multiplayer. I played it for a couple hours and it was just kind of like, okay, well, it's multiplayer and that's pretty much it. It didn't blow me away or anything. It wasn't like Hunter Mode in Crisis where they found a system that worked perfect with their gameplay style. In this case, there are elements here where you could set traps. You can use some environment pieces to your advantage for mobility or for whatever. But overall, it just kind of felt like it was generic multiplayer with a little bit of progression. You could go through and unlock things very much in the same way that you can in the single player campaign. But even though they offer several different gameplay types, unless you're really into the Tomb Raider universe, or if you want to play, either one of these 2 of 3 available factions that you're going to see in the game, there really isn't a whole lot here that's going to keep you coming back for more. Now, don't let mediocre multiplayer deter you from checking out this game's excellent single-player campaign. There's so much content here to be consumed. Again, I was playing through on, I believe, normal, and I finished the game in 11 hours with a 72% completion rate. There's still a handful of optional tombs out there I have not collected up. There's all these logs and diary pieces and artifacts that I've not collected. And the game's ending itself was very satisfying, so it makes me want to go back now and complete the rest of the island. And if I could work it out, the rest of these crazy death scenes. All right, so there you have it, folks. Like I said, there's a lot of content here. I'd imagine if I went through on the hardest difficulty, because remember, there's 2 different sections where you can set hard. At the beginning of the game, you can actually set it to like easy, normal, hard. And then if you go into the options, there's a combat difficulty that you can also increase there. So I'm imagining one of them probably makes QuickTime events more difficult to trigger, right? The other one just is straight up for combat. So I'd imagine going through and doing it that way would probably take a lot more time, especially going the completionist route to 100% everything on the hardest difficulty. Again, I did everything on normal, right? And I only went 72% of the way. So I could have easily tacked on, just to my time personally, I could have tacked on probably another, I would say, 3 hours at least, because there was a whole bunch of optional tombs, and there was all the different documents to go find, and then to go through and listen to all the dialogue behind all of this, and find all the artifacts and all this stuff. There's a lot of stuff to do here. So for about maybe a total of, let's just say, maybe 18 hours worth of play, this is totally worth it. They did a great job bringing this back. I look forward to. I got tired of Tomb Raider games for a while there. They started the RPG they did. Like, what is that? Like, it was silly. I was kind of over it. Like, just kept rehashing it. But now with the reboot, hopefully they stay along these lines, finding that great middle ground between like Uncharted and like a third-person shooter or a platformer or whatever you want to call it. So that's it, guys. Mike B, aka Fony. Next week, no idea what I'm gonna do. So I'll see you then. Bye.